Hello, and welcome to Archive Dive. I'm Maria Lockwood, a reporter with the Superior Telegram. Each month, we dip into files on historic events, people, and places in Superior and Douglas County with local historians. The sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald, with the loss of all 29 men aboard, has been memorialized in songs, books, and a musical. A new group in Superior, the Friends of the Fitz, is seeking to add a historical marker to that list. The marker would be built on Barker's Island, in sight of the docks where the Fitzgerald took on its final load of taconite in November of 1975. The group hopes their drive to build a marker will set off a year of activities focused on the 50th anniversary of the sinking. They're calling it the Year of the Fitz. Helping us dive into the story today are two members of the Friends group, local historian Teddy Moronic and Brianna Feint, curator of collections and exhibits for the Richard I. Bong Veterans Historical Center. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Maria, for inviting us.
Thank you, Maria.
I'm very interested in how you came up with an idea of putting a marker for the Fitzgerald in Superior.
Our board president, Terry Lundberg, asked me one day, is there a marker for the Fitzgerald? And so I just checked into it, and there wasn't. And so then it just sort of hung out in the back of my mind. I didn't really do anything with that information until one day Teddy came to research a little bit in the archives, and it was like we both had the exact same idea at the same time.
Yeah, I had been thinking about it for a long time because I was here when it happened in Superior, and that day just sticks in your memory because, well, one thing was the weather. It was a relatively nice day, and then it just turned horribly bad. But I think if you grew up in Superior, if you lived in Superior, you knew lots of people who, as they used to say, were on the boats.
Mm-hmm.
Our next door neighbor was on the boats. I had relatives who were on the boats. And so when something like that happens, it doesn't matter if you know anyone. It's just, this could happen to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a tragedy, to lose the entire crew. That was the last time, I believe, that a ship and its entire crew have been lost on the Great Lakes. Was the Fitzgerald.
Wow.
Yeah, so, and I went down to the Bong because I wanted to do this research about Dick Bong's plane,
Mm-hmm.
like how they actually got it to northern Wisconsin, the plane that's on display at the Bong right now. And Brianna came by and she was talking to me, and we were talking about Dick Bong, and I had said I'd just been out there in Poplar and I'd gone by the historical marker that was there. And I thought it looked really nice. And then we kind of looked at each other and went, Edmund Fitzgerald. It was really weird. It was like...
It was very strange.
It was like, it was just meant to be that, that we were both having these thoughts. And then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, we should do something.
Right. And you've got a couple other members to join in to the Friends group already.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how they came about. It's just like we attract people. I don't know.
Well, Jenny Van Sickle is on the city council.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had emailed her a few times just about the process of putting up a historical marker and what does that entail. And then she got interested. And I'm not sure about Kathy.
Well, Kathy came on board because she has the idea of writing a play about the Fitz for next year to be performed in her theater, Time Arc Theater. So I thought, well, she's a great one to have on because she has done a lot of research about the Fitzgerald, and maybe from a different, she's writing this from the point of view of the survivors, the families and friends of the people who were on board. So we make up a pretty good group.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What do you have to do to get a historical marker? What are the steps?
You have to give blood. No, I guess I was really surprised. I think I was of the opinion that you contact the Historical Society, they go, great idea, and they take it from there. But it's really quite a process.
It is. It's so we are responsible for all the costs. I think when I went into it, I sort of thought if you come up with the idea, the Historical Society, Wisconsin Historical Society helps pay for it, but that is not the case. So we are raising money to put this together, and there's a big approval process, and from everywhere from where it's located to what the text says. So they have to approve everything along the line.
Yeah, and I was really surprised at that too, because I was under the impression that ask and they will give it to you. But they do have lots of rules about it, how big it can be. I mean, you can purchase various sizes, and we, of course, decided to go with the largest. So there's that cost, and they're very specific about the text, like how many spaces. It's not words, how many spaces. And punctuation counts and spaces between words count. So you're limited to what you can say. I was really surprised myself after I got into
Were
it.
you able to, obviously, to list the names of all of the men who were on the ship would have taken up those 700 spaces plus, right?
It would have. And I think we really wanted to do that. But the Historical Society says that these plaques are to be treated as an educational tool and they are not a memorial.
Okay.
So, 29 names is a lot, and it would have taken up almost everything that we were allotted, and so we wouldn't have been able to tell anything about the Fitz itself.
Okay.
Yeah, but we hope to honor the men in some other way.
Have you written down the narrative? Have you gotten that approved yet? Or?
Well, I sent it in at the beginning of September and the other thing I was very surprised at is how long this takes to produce the actual marker. Yeah, and so it's been a process.
Sounds like it. Why did you choose Barker's Island?
We went through many locations as we were talking about where to put it. But I think for me, it was where is it going to be most accessible and where will the most people see it? And so Barker's Island just seemed a really logical choice. And it's also the Parks and Rec over in Superior. I think that they really liked that spot too and suggested that one. So it was sort of a group decision.
Yeah. I would have been happy if I could have put it on the dock, really, because the dock is still there where the Fitz loaded. But it is true that the Historical Society has a lot of sort of rules about where it can be placed, and they want it to be easily accessible. Either you can get out and look at it, or you can drive by in a car and stop there and look at the marker. And Barker's Island turned out to be the ideal situation because where it will be, you can look over and see the docks, the very tips of the docks, but they're still there. So I just wanted that connection with the dock.
Why Superior? Why is Superior the place for this marker?
Well, Superior really sort of gets left out of the whole narrative about the Fitz. They really do. They do the lights up at Two Harbors, Split Rock, and they had that play. It was called 10 November. That was done in Duluth. But the Fitz left from Superior. And it never comes out when people are writing or talking about the Fitz. Duluth always gets mentioned, because it's the bigger city. But it went out the Superior entry. We were the last people to see it. And that was its only visit to Superior that year.
Oh, wow.
It was on November 9th they left. Yeah.
I also think there's such a connection to the men who were on the ship in Superior and northern Wisconsin. There were men from Superior, Iron River, Ashland, Washburn. And so there's a real connection to northern Wisconsin there for the men that were aboard.
Yeah, there were 8 men from northern Wisconsin, or from Wisconsin. There were some that were from further south, but the majority of the men were from Ohio. And there's only 2 from Minnesota. But it just seems that this was the last place that they had contact with people. This is the last people who bid them farewell. And I thought Superior is the place where this belongs.
Right. What do you remember about that day?
I remember that it was a horrible storm. And the one really big memory I have of it is when I think of the Fitz, I always think of Dennis Anderson, because he was the one that people called when they found out about this, and he went on TV and was broadcasting the news about what had happened. And I think of him, he comes to mind right away, and he sort of represented everybody in the Twin Ports worrying about what had happened to this boat. So it wasn't a nice day. It was a terrible snowstorm. It was an awful day. Yeah.
Why does the Fitzgerald capture so much attention? What is it about the Fitzgerald?
2 words, Gordon Lightfoot. And that is true. It's not to make judgments on anything else, but if it hadn't been for Gordon Lightfoot, I don't think the Fitz would have turned into the legend it is. It would have certainly in the Twin Ports and any shipping areas, but that song just changed everything about it. I had a group of students come to the library for a mural tour, and they were from Barron, Wisconsin. They're middle schoolers, high schoolers. And we at the library has a beautiful painting of the Fitzgerald that Carl Gaboy did. And when I came to talk about it, I said, you probably don't know about the Edmund Fitzgerald. And they all looked at me like the same time and they said, we do. And I said, well, how would you know? And they said, Gordon Lightfoot.
I totally agree. I think
Yeah.
that he elevated that to the national consciousness. But I do also think that it's, well, like Teddy said, it's the last time that a ship went down and everybody passed away on it. And there's also that enduring mystery, like you just don't really know for sure what happened. And I think that captures people's imagination and they want to know more.
Right. Can you walk us through that last day and a half? Because they loaded one day and then the next night they went down, right?
Right. Yeah. They sailed off into nice weather and went through the Superior Entry and, headed on up. And it just, the weather forecast kept coming in. This was coming from, the south and moving our way. I don't know if Captain McSorley of the Fitz, he had been sailing for 44 years. I don't know if you think by that time I've seen everything and I can get through everything. So they get up towards the Canadian border and they start to pull over, more towards land to get out of the worst of the storm, but it doesn't really help them. And then they lost their radar.
Oh, no.
And they were still in contact with the Anderson.
Okay. Was it also a taconite boat?
Yes, I think they were carrying taconite too. I believe so.
But it's another Laker who was also taking
but they were in,
route.
Yep. And there was somebody else too, I think, who was further behind. And this guy had listened. He had looked at different weather forecasts. So he was in a different position, but the Fitz got the worst of it. And, as you said, nobody knows for sure what happened.
Right.
Could be anything.
And then tell us a little bit about the Arthur Anderson's role in this.
Right. Well, the Arthur Anderson was the last to hear from the Fitz. That's when Captain McSorley, they were asking Captain McSorley, how's it going? He said, we're holding our own.
Okay.
And that was the last words they heard from them. And then they couldn't get them on radar. They couldn't see them on radar. And so they went to safety. They pulled in and to Whitefish Point, I think that's where the Anderson went. And then when they got there, they asked them to go back out again. The Coast Guard, their only boat was in Duluth.
Oh.
And the ones in the Sioux were already in maintenance, winter maintenance, so they weren't available to use. And the Anderson was the only thing that they could think of that could go out there and see if there were survivors. And I just listened to, if anyone wants to know about what happened to the Fitz, I recommend listening to Mike Simonson's KUWS radio show that he did called We're Holding Our Own. He did it on the 20th anniversary of the Fitz, and he interviewed Captain Cooper, Bernie Cooper, who was the captain on the Anderson, and asked him about the decision to go back out. And even, listening to Anderson at that time, 20 years later, you could still tell what a decision it was for him, an awful decision. Like, do I take these guys out back into where, it's a horrendous storm. Do I chance this? But then you're thinking about all those men on the Fitz. So you go out, and when Mike was talking to him, you could still hear the sorrow in his voice about what had happened. And even when you listen to Cooper or read the conversation of Cooper talking to the Coast Guard, like, I don't know if I want to do this. And I don't blame him. And boy, I give him high honors for doing that, and everybody on that boat that went back out there. But
how bad was the storm?
It was bad.
How big were the waves? Did they ever?
Over 50 feet, I think.
I think so. Wow.
You don't mess with Lake Superior. The Native Americans have this legend that there's a monster that lives under the lake. And I read somewhere that they would go to the Superior Entry, the Native Americans would, and they would offer gifts to this monster who was under the lake so they would have safe passage. And you truly have to believe that when you hear about this storm, that you think the Fitz, when it was built, was the largest boat sailing the Great Lakes at 729 feet.
Really?
It was the largest. It was the best,
And it had set many records for speed and for how much it could hold. it was the best ship on the lakes.
And it had never been lengthened, like I think the Anderson had been. And so you think about, well, when they put these pieces together, is that what caused it to break up? But it was just as it had come off, the day they launched it, it was still the same boat.
How old was the Fitz at that point? Do you know when it was built?
It was launched in 58.
In 58.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was what? I'm so good at
Less
math.
than 20 years.
17 years old. Yeah. So it was a newcomer. I mean, some of these boats had been sailing for 50 years, 60 years.
Exactly. I read an article that said really it was in its prime. It was, yeah.
Wow.
And it had just gone through inspection.
Okay.
Mhm.
They had noticed some trouble with the hatch, but I read that very, very rarely, almost never, did they ever take a ship out of use during the shipping season.
Right.
And they were so close to the end of the shipping season by then, but nobody predicted this storm.
No. Oh my goodness. So you've started the Friends of the Fitz. You're hoping to have this year of the Fitz. What do you envision the year of the Fitz is going to be?
I think we all sort of envision this grassroots community celebration. And so we are not the committee who's going to plan everything, but just anybody who has an idea for something they would like to do to commemorate. I think one of the ideas is like if a book club wants to read a book about the Fitz and commemorate it that way, or if we bring a speaker up to talk about that night at the library or at the Bong Center, just sort of everybody compiling their own ideas for what we can do to remember the men and the families, because there are still people in town who are family members and we're related. And so we want to acknowledge them too.
The library for the last couple of years has been doing a calendar with the murals. We're pictured on one for every month. And I talked to them this year, and they're going to put the Fitz, Carl Godboy's painting of the Fitz on the cover of the calendar this year. So
Wonderful.
everybody go and buy one when they go for sale.
There you go.
It goes to a good cause, to the Superior Public Library. So that's kind of what I have envisioned too, that people will run with this idea and commemorate the Fitz in some way.
Big, small.
Yeah.
Just
Right.
The Spirit Room has, they always have their named cocktails. So maybe they'll think of something that during the month of November that can honor the Fitz.
right. So businesses, groups,
Yeah.
individuals.
Yeah, I think it would be really nice. So
What kind of feedback have you gotten from the community after they learned about the Friends group?
We have already been getting donations, so we're raising money, and we have been raising money for this. And we have had one very generous donor, Terry Lundeberg, who is the president of the Bong Center, and he has matched all the donations. So yeah, I think it's been a good response so far.
Wonderful. Have people come forward with ideas for activities yet?
I haven't heard anybody
No,
yet.
But they can, right?
Right.
Even
Yeah.
throughout the year if they have
Right.
ideas.
Absolutely.
And Brianna has done a Facebook page for the group. So I think we'll be hitting a lot of other people that way too. Jenny and I were interviewed by Wisconsin Public Radio, and somebody heard that, and they did actually donate already because they had
Wonderful.
heard our interview. So
So it's just getting the word out.
yeah.
What are your thoughts? What's it going to be like seeing that marker there?
I'll probably cry. I could cry now when I think of, how many people that affected in such a tragic way. People lost their lives, but families lost, loved ones. One of the saddest things I heard, I can't remember if it was touched on in Mike Simonson's program, but there was a woman, I think she was either from Washburn or Ashland. It was not Superior, but she was from northern Wisconsin, and she had her 2 little kids, and they came to Superior and went out to the Superior entry because her husband was on the boat. And apparently those boats get close enough that you can talk, but her husband wasn't on deck. There was somebody else that she spoke with. But her kids were tiny. They were not even in grade school, I don't think. So that just made me so sad. But the one thing I learned, which I am so happy this happened, there was so much interest in this boat. And there were people who did diving, but who brought in subs to go look at it. And they were so enthusiastic about this. And they were, in fact, I think one of these groups was the one that discovered that there was a body outside of the boat, that he was wearing a life jacket. They couldn't identify it. And they were so interested in all of this, and people get so interested in Great Lakes shipping. Diving is just a huge business. But I give kudos to the Canadian government because it's actually on their property that you can't go down there.
No more.
And you can get a
diving.
permit. I think it would have to be very, very rare that they would give someone a permit. Also, if you do get caught diving, it's $1 million fine, which I say good. I really do. It's a resting place for these people, and we're never going to figure out what happened.
Right.
No, I agree.
They probably didn't even know what happened to them when it did happen. So
One of the stories that really touched me when I've been reading about this is when they did bring up the bell. So they did have they got all the family together. The surviving family members requested that the bell be brought up and then replaced with another bell that had all of the crew listed on the bell. So that was done, and all the family were out on this boat, and they did a funeral ceremony basically and memorializing this. And I just thought that was beautiful. And I think, all these family members are now, they're interconnected forever. And
yeah. And I also say God bless Gordon Lightfoot. And he was he wrote this song in like 3 days, and he never thought it was going to get airplay because it's 11 minutes long and radio stations were, but it just turned into a huge hit. And he donated to the families,
Wow.
And I just think he did us a great service because it made people really think about how dangerous a job this is. And it probably made people think like, we have to up our game on what can we do if something like this happens again? And can we help save lives? Lake Superior, I am so in awe of that lake because it has no humility. This is who it is, and it is always going to win.
Right.
And this really brought that home, I think.
Definitely. Well, thank you. Thank you, Brianna. Thank you, Teddy. Thank you for listening to Archive Dive. New episodes are available monthly at superiortelegram.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic you'd like us to explore, email me at mlockwood@superiortelegram.com.